I'm Chris Magra. I'm the director of the Center for the Study of Tennesseans in War, and we're privileged today to have General Mike Holmes with us, who is not only a Tennessean, he's a UT grad and coming back for the College of Engineering, and was gracious enough to come in and make a donation to the center. We're always happy to take veterans' collections and preserve their military service awards, papers, service records, and it's our mission to research, preserve, and share those records. So welcome to the center.
Thanks, happy to be here.
It's a privilege to have you here, and we'll talk a little bit about kind of your early life and establish your bona fides as a Tennessean, which won't be hard to do, and then get into your military service, which stretches about 40 years. There's a lot to talk about, more than we have time to talk about today, and then at the end just talk about what you've done since 2020. So, born and raised in Knoxville?
Born in Robertson County, Tennessee, north of Nashville. My dad was the first generation to go to college in his family, and he came to UT in the class of 56 on a Future Farmers of America scholarship. He worked as the clerk in a night court back when there were little hotels that served traveling salesmen, and that got him a room for he and my mom. And then Army ROTC helped pay some of the bills. He left UT and did a year of active duty in the Army. Korean War was over. They were getting rid of Army lieutenants. He went back to his little hometown and worked for several commercial dairies, tested milk for the state, and then came back to work for UT in 1962 when I was 5. At what used to be the Dairy Experiment Station on Alcoa Highway, which is now the Cherokee Farm Research.
So born in 1957.
Yep.
And you mentioned that your dad served. Was that part of what made you want to serve?
I think so, but maybe subliminally. You know, my dad was an Army reservist for 32 years. And I would tell my kids when I was deploying over and over to the Middle East that I remember marking off the 2 weeks that my dad did summer camp every year off a calendar with X's, and it was the longest 2 weeks, of my life in that time frame. So I certainly was aware of his service. I think I kind of got interested in flying, and then that flying led to service.
Got you. So you come here to the University of Tennessee and you graduate in 1981 with an engineering degree.
Right.
Why engineering?
Yeah.
Where did that love and passion for engineering come from?
Well, at West High School, we had a really good science teacher that actually was from the same little town in Middle Tennessee my parents were from. My parents knew his parents. And he said, Mike, I think you should go over. They give an engineering aptitude test at UT. I think you should go take that test when I was a senior. And I went over and took it, and I'm good at standardized tests, and I did well on that. And I said, well, I don't know what else I want to do, so kind of why not? And the freshman year of engineering courses at the time were designed to weed out people that shouldn't be here, is how they thought of it. Now they're designed to try to keep people around. But they were pretty tough courses. I was playing football, but the combination of those two made me really use my time well.
It is a really tough course. For those of you who don't know, the engineering degree here at the University of Tennessee is one of the hardest degrees. It's nowadays a 5-year degree.
Well, it took me 6, which I'll get around to. So that year I did well. Then I stopped playing football. I was a terrible student as a sophomore, and I came to talk to the cooperative education department in the engineering school, which place students with industry because I needed help paying for school, and kind of fortuitously they placed me with NASA down at Kennedy Space Center. And so I would spend fall and spring quarters down in Florida and summer and winter quarters here going to school. I had a boss down there again that was a UT guy, a guy named Ed Morgan, that played on one of the national championship teams at UT in the early 50s, played in the NFL, blew his knee out. Came back and got an engineering degree from UT and was running the facilities branch for NASA. And between him and a couple of professors here, they kind of taught me the work ethic it was going to take to succeed in life. And so I got to be a better student I learned how to fly at Patrick Air Force Base. The Air Force ran aero clubs at the time to teach non-pilots how to fly, and they pretended the NASA employees were DoD employees and let us in. And that got me started down the path toward wanting to fly.
So you had this passion for flying while you're here playing football at the University of Tennessee and working on a degree in engineering.
Yeah, after that, kind of football through, pursuing other things and then flying.
Yeah.
And then I was working on a double major in electrical and aerospace engineering, and the Air Force offered me a pilot slot in 1981, and so I took the one I could finish up first, which was that electrical engineering degree, and went off the pilot train.
So before 81, had you considered military service and thought maybe I'll do a career here at all, or was it this offer from the Air Force that kind of flipped the switch for you?
Well, again, circumstances are funny in life, but when I got that pilot's license and I decided I wanted to learn how to fly, I actually took the oath with the Navy to go to Navy flight training. They had a program where you would go to OCS the summer before your senior year in college, and then go back and do a week refresher, get commissioned, and go to flight school. And I signed up for that program, took the oath, and when it came time to go to OCS, the recruiter said, "Hey, I know we talked about you being a pilot, but we've kind of run out of pilot slots, so you can be a navigator or nothing. Go over there and tell me what your answer is." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll take nothing." And then I was able to find a pilot slot with the Air Force.
Wow. Yeah. And so 81, you decide we're going to go into the Air Force.
Yep.
At 81, in 1981, are you thinking this is going to be a career for me?
No.
Or just something cool I'm going to do at the time, and got this offer and I'm going to take advantage of it?
Yeah, not really. When I was going to go to the Navy, I wanted to fly F-14s. I don't know why. That's what I wanted to do. When I joined the Air Force, I wanted to fly F-15s. And because of my time with NASA, I thought I might go fly fighters for a tour or two, take my engineering degree, and go to test pilot school and see about going back to NASA, either as a test pilot or an astronaut. And then I kind of got seduced by the fighter weapons school in the Air Force and seeing how, good I could be at flying and teaching. And then I got seduced by the idea of being a squadron commander. And then you're 35 years old and you've made choices in your life.
And that's a good kind of fast forward through this early part of your career. What made you want to stay with it? Was it the technology? Was it the leadership positions? The new challenges? What motivated you this first decade, let's say 1981 to 1991, to stick with it?
I tell people that the Air Force kind of gave me 3 careers over that time frame. The first one was teaching people how to teach people to fly and fight with F-15s. So as an instructor in the squadron, as a fighter weapons school graduate, I was kind of the chief pilot in the squadron, and my job was to design and execute the training plans to try to help everybody else, be good in the airplane. And it was a interesting skill set that was hard to manage, which was hard to learn, which was kept life interesting. My bosses gave me autonomy to pursue that and make mistakes and learn how to do it. And I had a strong sense of purpose on trying to help young men at the time to be young men and women, prepared so that they could survive in combat.
Where does that love of challenges and love of leadership come from? Is that your dad? Is that anyone in your family, or teachers along the way, or what do you attribute that to?
My dad was a superb leader, whether it was on the farm or it was in the Army Reserve. Everybody that ever worked for him wanted to work for him again. I tell people, I learned a lot about leading people from my dad. My mom was more the one that had the chip on her shoulder, and I probably had some of that, of always thinking, people think, I'm not good enough because of this or that, and I'm going to try to outwork them and show them.
And I meant to ask you what your dad thought about you joining the Air Force.
Well, he was,
as an Army man.
Yeah, he was pretty good with it. I went over to the recruiter and took the oath, and I was getting ready to go to OTS, and I drove back to the farm. I said, "Hey, Dad, I did it." I signed up, and he looked at me and he said, "What rank are you now while you go to OTS?" I said, "I think I'm a E5." And he said, "Don't Air Force E5s salute Army colonels?"
Nice. Yeah.
So I think we do. I think we do. Yeah.
Good one, Dad. So you decide to stick with it. You loved the teaching aspect, the challenges of it, and leading young men. When did you first get a sense, or did you get a sense of this tremendous arc of a career? Not many 4-stars. We were told recently, I don't know if it's true or not, 6 4-stars have come out of the University of Tennessee, and you're one of them.
Yeah.
Would you ever?
That's humbling. No.
This early part, did you get any sense of that, or is just the challenges and the love of?
Oh, my second tour. So we went to Langley and flew there 2.5 years. Went to the weapons school and then went to Okinawa. And during that tour on Okinawa, I was in the 44th Tactical Fighter Squadron at the time that had a
What year was this?
This was 1987 or 8.
Okay.
So I went to weapons school in 86. We were on Okinawa 86 to 89. I came back to go to Squadron Officer School, the Air Force's school for company grade officers back in Alabama. And at the end of that, the World War II version of our squadron was having a reunion. And I asked my boss, hey, can I stop off? Will you pay for me to stop off? And he said, yeah, if we were in the United States, we'd send a jet and some guys. And I was there. I had a great time hanging out with that crowd and learning from them. And they had one guy out of their squadron that had become a brigadier general. The rest of them, most of them left after the war. And he said, Mike, what do you want to do in the Air Force? I go, well, sir, I don't know. I think it might be pretty great, to be a squadron commander. And I remember him slapping the table, making a loud noise, and saying, that's the problem with you guys. You don't have any ambition. You ought to say, sir, I'm going to be a general and I'm going to lead the Air Force. And I wasn't there at all, but I remember him saying
Slapping
that.
the table and saying that. Yep.
And I started reading. What some of my professors later would call boys' adventure stories, kind of popular histories of the Air Force, lives of the aces and that kind of stuff. And then being stationed in the Pacific, wherever we went, if we were in the Philippines or if we're in Korea, if we're in Japan, I'd read a book about the Air Force experience there. In World War II or in Korea or in Vietnam, and then you could go fly over the places, visit some of them.
Yeah.
And I kind of got interested in that. And then when it was time to go to school at Maxwell to Air Command and Staff College, where the Air Force sends its majors, and then I stayed a year and attended the School for Advanced Air and Space Studies, which is kind of a master's degree in how to use air power. I think then is when I started thinking critically, not just reading the book to see what happened, but to think about arguing with the guy who wrote it. Did he get it right? Or with the people that made choices in that time about, how did they do? Did they get it right?
Yeah.
So when that first career ran out of teaching people how to teach people how to fly and fight in F-15s, the next one the Air Force gave was learning how to lead Air Force organizations. So a couple of years of school, a couple of years on the staff at U.S. European Command, and then back to Langley again to be a squadron operations officer and a squadron commander. Quick trip to Navy War College, and then a group command and a wing command. And the Air Force gave me the chance to learn another interesting new skill set. My bosses gave me some autonomy that I was happy for, to learn and make mistakes. And my purpose had extended beyond, a handful of F-15 pilots to everybody that it takes to run a squadron first, ops and maintenance, and intel and together, then to the people that run a group, including the airfield, and then to the people that run a wing and do everything that takes care of everybody that does it.
Now I'm going to ask you a question no one's asked you.
Okay.
This man's been interviewed a lot. You got a degree in history.
I do.
You got a master's in history from the University of Alabama.
I do.
So you were talking about being in the Pacific and having places that you go, you would want to study the history. When during this early phase of your career do you pick up a master's degree in history?
Well, I did it while I was in school at Alabama at Air Command and Staff College. So at the time, it was understood that you needed to have a master's degree if you wanted to be a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. That was kind of a requirement. I had tried to do one when I was a squadron weapons officer on Okinawa, and trying to be a squadron weapons officer and a new husband and a graduate student, I told my wife I'm bad at all three of these. So I think I need to drop one and see if I can handle 2 of them. So I dropped the master's degree. But then when we came to Alabama, the University of Alabama had a great program.
Now, why Alabama?
Well,
we're at the University of Tennessee. This
Yep.
man is a distinguished University of Tennessee alum.
Well, the choices they had for a master's at night were run by Auburn and by Alabama.
Yeah.
And the one that Alabama ran was in history, largely military history, largely air power
Yeah.
history.
Yeah, right
The professors drove down from Tuscaloosa 2 nights a week. We'd do 3 hours on
Wow.
Tuesday night and 3 hours on Thursday night. Take 2 courses a semester 3 times.
I've never driven anywhere for my grad
Yeah.
students
Well,
to teach them.
You know, they wanted...
They come here to us.
What the professor said was that they wanted to talk to somebody besides undergraduates about their ideas. And they did a good faculty. Several of them went on to teach the service academies or other places. And my little seminar was 2 or 3 Air Force guys, a Marine helicopter pilot, a Marine Harrier pilot, a Navy helicopter pilot, a couple Army guys. And I would tell people, you know, I think I learned more about war at night during the ACSC year than I did during the daytime. It was a good course, and going through those readings, one of the courses was a history of strategy that Jenny Kiesling taught. She went on to be at West Point. And then the next year at SAS, we went through those same readings again, and you see them different when you read them a second time. And then 2 or 3 years later at Navy War College, went through a lot of those same readings again. And now post-command, you're a little older, you see a lot of different different things in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm still a Tennessee.
A couple things
Tennessee
stood
guy.
out. Yeah, you know, a couple things stood out to me. One, you're a Tennessee guy, and also you're kind of a STEM guy. You're kind of in the science and engineering guy. But here's this history degree from the University of Alabama. Wanted to ask him about that. Yeah. So then we're into the 90s, and you're kind of hard charging and maybe thinking. There, you know, like the officer said, slamming the table, that you gotta have ambition, and you're thinking maybe there's something to that, and taking advantage of opportunities that are offered. Can we step back from that and talk about the wars that you're involved in, and are there any particular challenges with, let's say, the Gulf War, or even the end of the Cold War, that are motivating you, that are pushing you, that are challenging you?
Yeah, those first 3 flying tours in the F-15, we were focused on preparing to fight the Warsaw Pact. When I was at Langley, we would go to the Netherlands in the summer and go to the base that we would go to if we were going to have to fight the Warsaw Pact in Europe. Yeah. And then on Okinawa, we were going to fight Russia, but we were going to fight them in the Far East Military District, you know, on the all the way halfway around the world, to slow them down and to be a thorn in their side. And then went back to Holloman, and we went back to the Netherlands, but things were starting to change. And Desert Storm happened at the end of that tour. And, you know, my main takeaway from Desert Storm was humility, that the Air Force could win that without me being a part of it. Mm-hmm. And it made a lot of us that didn't go. About 40% of the tactical air forces were used in Desert Storm, and the other 60% we were calling each other saying, do you think we're done? Will there be any room for us in the 60% that didn't go? And it turned out, you know, people have short memories about that. Yeah. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we went from Holloman immediately after the war, and we were the first guys to start flying around in circles over Kuwait first, and then over Iraq. That summer we went, the oil fires were still burning in the 2 oil fields, and we were flying overhead the soldiers largely that were in Kuwait to make sure that Iraq didn't think, you know, that they could bother those guys. And then that morphed over time into the no-fly zones. And so as a assistant operations officer, as an operations officer, as a squadron commander, it was, you know, 1 trip a year to Saudi Arabia to enforce the no-fly zone over southern Iraq or northern Iraq.
Were those very different experiences for you? The thinking of Russia as the enemy, and kind of strategizing to protect American interests versus going to the Middle East or thinking about the struggle in the Middle East, or did you make connections between those?
It was certainly different. We were training for different cases. Also, the air combat game was changing. You know, when I left the airplane to go to school, I was flying F-15s that had AIM-7Fs, which was a early, kind of radar-guided missile, and AIM-9Ls, which were an all-aspect infrared missile, but could be deceived by flares and things. When I came back, it was to the Advanced Medium-Range Air-to-Air Missile, the AMRAAM, which had a radar of its own, a seeker of its own, so it was an autonomous missile, and so I had to throw out all my briefing guides and learn how to fight in that new world. So that had changed, the threats had changed, and the weapons that we had changed, but largely it was a presence mission more than a combat mission. About twice a deployment, somebody might think, hey, I'm going to get to go commit on one of the Iraqi guys that was flying, but they always turned around.
And into the 90s, when did you start to see the technology kind of shift? We're not to 9/11 and we're not to the war on terror yet, but there must have been early signs in the 90s that there's going to be a technological shift in the Air Force.
Yeah, well, there were the wars, in Yugoslavia,
Yeah.
which I was at U.S. European Command for the deliberate force campaign for the first, not the Allied force, the one that forced them to change governments and do things, but the first kind of short bombing campaign. It was the introduction of new things like the Predator and unmanned systems, and kind of using all of the nation's national security assets to bring them to bear to try to find a couple of buttons you could push to make their leadership give up, and then use new tools to do that. So that was changing, but I won't tell you that I predicted that somebody would use a different way to use air power against the United States. I was in the Pentagon that day, and I was probably as surprised as anybody.
On 9/11.
Right.
Okay. Now, so backing up a little bit, what were your initial thoughts about drone warfare as a former pilot, as someone who appreciates the human component of air power? Were you against?
I don't think I was against. I think I've tried to tell people, throughout my career that people expect the Air Force to perform certain missions. And, the primary one is to control the air so that the Joint Force can exploit it. We shouldn't be married to platforms. We should be married to missions, controlling and exploiting the air. And, people would complain. The Air Force, most of my later years, was run by fighter guys, and people would complain, and my response was, well, the bomber guys stayed so stuck in their ways and couldn't change with when tactical aviation flexed its muscles in Vietnam, and we saw that you could fight wars that didn't involve nuclear combat. And if the fighter guys do the same thing, somebody will replace them if they don't follow along and keep up with what technology is required to accomplish the mission instead of the platforms that we fell in love with. I flew 3,000 hours in the F-15 A, B, C, and D. I was the ACC commander that made the decision that we're going to retire, the airplane, and my friends would say, it's a crying shame, and I go, no, it's a crying shame. We didn't retire them 15 years ago before they wore out. Yeah.
Well, that's some good historical thinking. As a history professor, I like to see that. Now, 9/11, you talked about being in the Pentagon. Can you take us a little bit in the weeds, and where are you as far as your rank at this point?
Yeah, I'm a lieutenant. I'm a colonel select, waiting to pin on colonel, working in a colonel's job in the Pentagon.
Okay.
Coming out of War College.
Okay. And I believe you said you didn't expect 9/11, and it's such a watershed moment in U.S. military history. Can you talk a little bit about how that changed the Air Force?
Yeah. Let's see. First, just the effort to get used to that and how fast the Air Force was able to get involved in Afghanistan, in those days shortly after. So they took my office, they called my office the Skunk Works. We were strategy, concepts, and doctrine, and there's another office called Checkmate that provided operational planning support.
I prefer Checkmate, no offense.
Yep. To the Air Force components, to the combatant commanders. And they put us together on September 12th so we'd have enough people to run 24-hour ops, and we supported planning for what was going to happen. We set up the ability to kind of watch operations all over the world, and we spent some time thinking about what's the right answer to do in Afghanistan, what are we going to do, and the nation ended up with this initial approach in Afghanistan, which is use local ground forces with the ties from the U.S. to be able to tie them to air power with FAC-As, or ground forward, ground controllers, largely from the special operations community that went in there early, and they were able to disarm and chase the Taliban and most of Al-Qaeda out in a period of weeks. They were able to eliminate that very small Afghan Air Force in a matter of hours in the first night. I think rhetoric that we had about doing things long range and things started to become more real. But then the big change was that we took every airplane in the Air Force, literally, on the combat side, and we turned them into close air support platforms. And so what that took was adding an advanced targeting pod to all of them, which is really high-grade optics, along with the geolocation to be able to type in GPS coordinates on the ground, and that thing would point the optics at the place you told it to, and now you could see like you were flying low and slow, even if you weren't flying low and slow. And then we added the radios to all the airplanes that they didn't have, that let you talk to guys on the ground and talk via SATCOM to somebody on the other side of a mountain that was between you and them. And we did training so that F-15E guys could become close air support guys, B-1s and B-52s could become close air support guys. So for about 20 years, we turned the whole Air Force into one that was focused on armed overwatch of Allied troops on the ground, and we let some of the how do you fight against a peer adversary go.
Yep. And do you think that those systemic changes to the Air Force would have happened eventually, or do you think that it was 9/11, this watershed moment, that really galvanized?
No, I don't think we would have turned the whole Air Force into a armed overwatch close air support force if we hadn't had 100,000 young Americans down on the ground for a prolonged period of time like that. Mm-hmm. It was the right thing to do at the time. Did we overdo it? Should we have continued to do the things to prepare for the rise of China and other things? Yes. If in an unlimited money game, you'd like to have done both.
And hindsight being what it is, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. No one could have foreseen that it would be a 20-year
Actually,
war.
there was a chief of staff and a secretary of the Air Force that got fired over saying, these are the wars we have now, but they're not the last wars we're going to fight, and we have to keep preparing for the other one. Buzz Mosley and Mike Wynn got fired by Gates for having the audacity to say that. Yeah.
Yep. And you spent the next 20 years, the last 20 years of your career in the global war on terror. And take us a little bit in the weeds again, down to you, kind of rising through the ranks here over the 2 decades.
Yeah. So squadron command, you're a lieutenant colonel. To be a colonel, you have to have a successful squadron command in the Air Force. That's where we pick our colonels from. And then we pick our generals from guys that had successful wing commands for the most part. So you work to find those jobs, get in those jobs, do well. You're in competition, with others. And then if you're selected for 1 star, that's still a promotion board, like all the promotion boards you met. The math is something like 1 in 100 lieutenants becomes a colonel, and 1 in 100 colonels becomes a general. And so there's hoops you have to go through. There's performance things you have to meet, but there are way more people that could have done it than there are people that do it. So there's some humility, involved in that too, of being at the right place at the right time, or having the right door open that allowed you to go do something. I could tell you lots of stories of times where somebody intervened in my career to give me a chance to go do something, starting with pilot training, where I was sick about every 3rd flight in the T-37, and my flight commander said, Mike, you're having a hard time. This must be really hard on you. You're flying the airplane well, but is this still something you want to do? It's like, oh yeah, absolutely, I want to do it. And he said, okay. And we went into the flight room, and it was just him and the instructors, and he said, Lieutenant Holmes doesn't get sick anymore. Everybody understand what I'm saying? They all nodded. And so, there were countless times where the difference between me getting to be a 4-star was because somebody like that intervened and gave me an opportunity or gave me a second chance.
And you briefly mentioned your wife. Can you talk about support either from your old family, your mom and dad, and any siblings?
Yeah, I have a brother. My brother's went to UT, graduated from the vet school, and then graduated from the Quillen School of Medicine at East Tennessee State. So he's the only guy I know with 2 doctorates and no undergraduate degree.
Shout out to his brother.
Yep.
And
that's Dr. Pat Holmes.
And I imagine that they're supportive of your career. Your wife and children at this point in the 2000s?
Yeah, so my wife, I met my wife in Knoxville. She went to Doyle High School. She left town to go to school at Chapel Hill. And about the time I went to the Air Force, and she did 2 years at Chapel Hill while I was learning how to fly and going through F-15 school. And then when I got my first assignment at Langley, she said, well, if I can get into William & Mary, I'll come up there. And so she transferred to William & Mary, and we lived in the same town for a year, and then we got married before her senior year in college, and then we jumped straight to Okinawa pretty much after that. So my wife was Phi Beta Kappa valedictorian of her government section at William & Mary, extremely capable person, and left to go to Okinawa with me, where she ran an undergraduate degree program and then a master's degree program for the universities that teach overseas, so that airmen and sailors and Marines and soldiers can work on college part-time. She ran that, and our first child, Rebecca, was born there in 1989 on Okinawa. Rebecca now has a physics PhD from Illinois and works at the National Lab in Los Alamos. Really, she has a smart mom. And then our son Wade was born in Alamogordo, New Mexico, kind of during Desert Storm, right there in '91. And see if I can get my years right. Yep, in '91.
Yep.
Both of them went to UNC as undergrads. Wade did a couple things and decided he wanted to fly and made his way into the Air National Guard and became an F-16 pilot. Very capable F-16 pilot, was selected to go to the fighter weapons school last year, and then Wade last year contracted a virulent aggressive brain tumor, and we lost Wade in May of this year.
Loss.
Yeah, thank you. Good guy.
And I imagine your family had something to do with that first star that you got.
Oh, absolutely. Sarah wrote kids' books. My wife, she found something that she could do in a portable career, and she wrote kids' chapter book novels and published 3. One of them that did the best was about military kids. It's called Operation Yes. It was on several state reading lists for a while. She did that, and as the spouse of a commander, there's plenty to do, and she would pick a couple of things that she liked to do and was good at, and she raised those 2 great kids.
Yep.
So that I could go to Saudi Arabia every year and fly in circles over Iraq, and go spend a year in Afghanistan as the wing commander at Bagram, and those kind of things.
And your first star was when?
I pinned on in '08.
Okay.
In Afghanistan.
In Afghanistan. And what are you thinking about when you get your first star? Are you thinking, okay, I've got a couple more years in the tank? Or are you thinking, no, I want to see this war on terror through to the end, which God bless you if you thought that in 2008?
Well, I came home from Afghanistan in 2009, and in the same way I was a little lost when my flying career ran out, I was a little lost when my leadership career ran out. I was a wing commander twice, including that one in combat, which was a fantastic experience and a way really to put everything I'd learned to do to use in a way that seemed useful at the time. And when I came home, I went to work in Secretary of Defense's policy office in Mideast policy. I was a while without jobs, waiting on timing. And frankly, like I said, I was a little lost again of now what do I do and how do I do this? But what the Air Force gave me the chance to learn to do now was to think about how to build an Air Force for the future. So, again, interesting skill set, different that I had to learn. Bosses gave me some autonomy to do it, and my purpose had now extended to people that weren't in the Air Force yet. People that were in high school and college that would join the Air Force down the road. So I worked there in OSD policy. I came back to the Air Staff, and I was the Deputy Director of Operations for the Air Force. So I got to spend some time in the tank as the Deputy Director of Ops and do those things and learn a little bit how we make our decisions. In OSD policy, what you learn as a military guy is how our country makes decisions. You go over to the sit room and sit in meetings in the West Wing and listen to the different factions talk about what we're going to do and how we're going to decide what to do and try to influence that. Then, I made 2-star.
What year was that?
I'm trying to remember what year I pinned it on. I think I pinned it on probably in 11.
Okay.
So the Air Force wants you to make, and at the time, the Air Force wanted you to make Brigadier General at the 24-year point if you were going to have time to do all the things to be a 4-star. I did not. I'm what we call the glove save. I made it at the 25th year, and it's iffy if you're a glove save on whether there'll be room for you or not. Because of Afghanistan and because of having bosses that appreciated the work I did there, they made sure I got promoted to 2-star on the first look, and it's usually the second look, and so I got a chance to catch back up a little bit, which meant I was still in the game. The Chief of Staff sent me down to be the Deputy Commander of Air Education and Training Command and make me a 3-star, which I'm pretty sure was his thinking was kind of a gold watch for 35 years of faithful service, and that would be the end.
Yeah.
And I got down there in July, and then in October, he called and said, "Hey, well, I'm bringing you back. Is Sarah going to kill me?" Because meanwhile, we had bought a house on Capitol Hill, a 125-year-old row house, and remodeled it to Sarah's specifications, and then moved out of it 3 months later. And he said, "Is she going to kill me if I bring you right back?" I said, "Not if you let her move into her house instead of living in the general officer housing, at Bowling." He said, "Okay, I'll take care of that." And so the job he brought me back to was the Director of Strategic Plans and Programs and Requirements, which basically is where the Air Force plans how to spend your money.
And what year was this?
This was in 2013.
Okay.
Or 2014. I went to ATC in 2013, came back in 2014, and led a team that built and defended the Air Force budget for 3 years. And you work 2 years ahead in a budget. There's always 3 budgets at once. There's one in execution that belongs to the finance guys. There's one that you're arguing for on the Hill. There's one you're arguing for on the Hill, and then there's one you're planning with OSD that will be the next one that you argue for on the Hill, that will be the next one that you're executing. So there's 3 budgets that exist at once. You try to keep them lined up together where they make sense, and then you try to convince the people in the Secretary of Defense's office that these ideas you have are good ideas, and we need more money. We need their money, actually, to do this would be better than what they're going to do with it, and then do the same thing on the Hill. And that was a great education. I would tell my friends from other Air Forces, $80 billion doesn't go as far as it used to, knowing that they had like a $2 billion budget.
Yeah.
But I got exposed to a lot of the bigger Air Force there because it was funding the whole Air Force, right? Not just the part that I had worked. And then at the end of that, they decided they wanted to keep me at the table in discussions, and so I went to Air Combat Command and got a 4-star.
And a 4-star was 2017?
2017.
Okay. Incredible career, a lot to talk about, but when you got your 4-star, can I ask you what you thought about the war on terror at that point? And are you thinking in 2017, I got to see this through to the end? Are you thinking there is an end? Are you thinking, what are you thinking?
You know, I'm not sure I ever really thought there would be an end, a definite, definitive end like we like to have, as Americans.
Yes.
When I came back to the Pentagon after being a wing commander, I got to work with a group. They called it the Council of Colonels. If you look at the Bob Woodward book that looks at this time, it's right. The Republicans are just losing the midterm elections. President Bush is getting ready to fire Rumsfeld when they lose the midterm elections. There's a lot of consternation about what should we do in Iraq now and what should we do in Afghanistan. So they brought a couple of colonels from each service together, post-command colonels, brigade commanders from the Army, guys that had a major ship command, and guys coming out of wings in the Air Force. And Peter Pace, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, took us. He didn't want the Joint Staff to do it, which ruffled some feathers in the Joint Staff, and they asked us to help them work directly for the Joint Chiefs and help them think about what to do in Iraq and what to do in Afghanistan. So we spent 6 months on Iraq, leading up to the decision that the president made, independent of them, really, to surge. I think left to their own devices, they would have tried to find a way to get out, but retired military guys were in the White House at the same time with the idea of a surge, and the president decided to do the surge, and so we finished that work, and everybody moved out to go execute a surge in Iraq. And then we spent 6 months looking at Afghanistan, which we kind of called an under-resourced economy of force measure. There's a military term, economy of force, that says sometimes you have to put just enough someplace not to lose, so that you can put your main effort, in the place where the main effort goes. So it was clear to me, and this was 2009 and 10, we were working through this, that Afghanistan was under-resourced. Whole lot of difficulties there with the idea of trying to create some kind of central government where there had never been one. Iraq had bureaucrats, they had a government, they had roads, they had things that you could use to restart an economy. Afghanistan had nothing, had none of that. So we worked hard and tried hard in Afghanistan for my year. But I won't say I was under an illusion that we were going to have a glorious victory coming out of that. And if you had asked me when we pulled out, how long that government was going to last, I'm not sure I would have said 2 weeks, but I would have said less than 90 days.
And then in 2020 is when you made the decision to retire.
Yep. Well, the Air Force and I made that decision
together.
That it was time. That it was time for me to go.
Yes. And what did your wife think about retiring?
She was ready. There was some talk about some other jobs, and she said, I don't want any more jobs. I supported you through all this. I came back when you kind of rose from the dead and got to be a 3-star and a 4-star and supported you at ACC. And I think, I think I've had enough.
Yeah. And so what does enough look like? Since 2020, what have you been up to last 5 years?
Well, I retired back into that house in D.C. that we remodeled. I went to work. There was a company called the Roosevelt Group that had represented to the government a lot of defense communities, and several of those were in Air Combat Command. So I knew them and they knew me. We hadn't always agreed on things. There's a tension between communities that want to hold on to what they've got, even though that may not be the right thing for the force going forward, or want more just because they want more, even though there's other communities that want more. I would tell them, look, I know you have to love your child best, but I have to love all my children, the same. But they asked me to come to work for them, and I worked representing those communities and representing largely new companies and startup companies in the defense space. I have a role as the chairman of the board with a startup called Red 6 that's trying to bring augmented reality into the way we train and operate airplanes, so that you see everything around you, but you can also see things that are generated constructively by computers in your headset. And I've worked for a couple other of the defense primes. In the summer of 2024, I decided that was enough full-time work. Roosevelt Group was kind enough to pay me a full-time salary, but let me do other things. So there's a point there where I had like 12 jobs, and my wife was ready to kill me.
Yes. You did not sit poolside after 2020 and sip margaritas.
But in 2024, that summer, in about May, we decided to retire from full-time work and go down to some part-time work and travel and do things. And we started on that, but I found out, you don't get to pick. Like I would tell people as a commander, you don't get to pick what you're going to work on. You have to work on what comes up. And what I ended up doing instead was being the caregiver to my dad to take him through his last 6 months, and then to my son through his last 6 months. Wade died in May of 2025. We buried him in Arlington in August of 2025. And so now I'm doing part-time work. I still do some mentoring and teaching for the Air Force. I help teach a course here in the Haslam School to Air Force supply chain managers. I'm a mentor in rotation with some other guys for the Air Force's 1-star and 2-star training courses. I have one of those next week with a bunch of new 1-stars, and that lets me keep my hand in and pass on, a little bit of what I learned along the way. And I spend a lot of time, as much as I can, with my daughter, my daughter-in-law, the 5 children my son left with my daughter-in-law, and my daughter out in New Mexico, her 3-year-old. So we have 6 grandbabies, 2 3-year-olds, and then 12, 13, and 15-year-old girls. And 5 of those are there in the D.C. area, so I get to spend a lot of time with them.
And you're on the board of the Tickle College
just joined. I'm the newest member of the advisory board at the Tickle College of Engineering.
Yes.
Dean Mensch has been, we've had a lot of interesting conversations, and they're doing some good things to try to make engineering school easier for veterans and non-traditional students, and I've been helping him some with that.
Yep. And if you are looking back on your career now in retirement, if you want people who are studying your life and your military career, as historians will, what's one thing you want them to remember about your military career?
There's an old saw that says, half a life is showing up. I don't think that's really true, but there's something to that. Success is built on repeatedly showing up, enthusiastically, what I now call answering the bell. And events like losing your son and those things lead you to think through, how do you approach things? And I think this idea of what now is a question that I was fairly good at answering those other times. There'd be jobs I wanted I didn't get. And the question is, okay, well then what now? Can I find another way to serve? And, Veterans Day was yesterday, I guess, and I watched the posts from my friends and, follow social media, and, one of them said, the chance to serve with great people like you and the little email group that he was talking to, I do that over and over and over again in spite of the things that came up. And ultimately, I think I got a lot more out of 39 years of service to the Air Force than it got from me, both in learning and in friendship and in satisfaction. I don't think my kids, I don't think they were, left behind by that. They lived in a lot of great places. They met a lot of interesting people. When they went off to school, they were very well prepared for it, ready to thrive on their own. But the person that sacrificed through all this was my wife, right? Yeah. So I guess when people look back on it, I'd like them to say, he answered the bell and he tried to do the right thing.
Yep. And thank you to your wife. General, it's been great talking to you, and hope you all will check out the General story on our YouTube channel and all of our veteran stories on the Center for the Study of Tennesseans in War and our website. Thank you all.